Good morning. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever you might be. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, donde sea que se encuentren. My name. Great. Lovely seeing you, everyone. My name is Florencia Librizzi. I'm the Director of Community Inclusive Development at ISLP. And my colleagues and I are delighted to welcome you to this event entitled Implementing Best Standards in Transparency and Accountability in Natural Resources Management. This event is hosted with Derecho, Ambiente y Recursos Naturales, DAR, and the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, ZELA.
Can I interrupt you 1 second, Florencia? Just one second, because las personas en español pueden estar perdiéndose de eso. Entonces, para dar la instrucción de la interpretación. Para los que están en el canal en español lo van a escuchar, entonces ustedes saben abajo en el globo de interpretación, ahí pueden escoger la opción para oírlo en español. And same for people in English, there are going to be some parts in Spanish, so you can go to the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen and choose the language you want to listen the conference in. Gracias, Florencia. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pedro, Marina, for that. I think it's very important, muy importante asegurarnos que todos podemos entender. Excelente. Espero que encuentren entonces la función que... Wonderful, great. So as I was just saying, we're really thrilled to have you all here and delighted to welcome you in this event that we are hosting with DAR and with ZELA, along with many wonderful speakers, including our long-standing volunteer and board member of the IIT, Lee DeHines, as well as our speakers for the Center for Environmental Policy and Advocacy, CEPA. So at ISLP, we are committing to supporting international and local NGOs and civil society organizations in their efforts and their participation and advocacy strategies to ensure that community needs as well as social environmental impacts can be properly addressed. So we hope that this cross-regional dialogue will really shed light on these important matters, as well as help promote cross-regional dialogue and help us understand other ways in which we can support you and work together for increasing standards of transparency and accountability for a more sustainable future. So without further ado, I would like to pass it on to my colleague, Pedro Villegas, Regional Legal Advisor, Latin America and CAP-AC Fellow. So he get us started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Florencia. And thanks, everyone. Good morning and good evening for some of you. So I just want to say three things for the benefit of the conversation. So first is of course, you're more than welcome to participate, to leave your questions. Just remember to be respectful. We will be pleased to answer, to pass along the question to our panelists. And the spirit of this conversation, and that's why we are calling it a dialogue, is to hear from you that are on the ground and that are working directly, advocating for best standards and behavior of mining and oil and gas investors and projects. So just a little reminder again for the people that are just joining. If you want to listen to the conversation in Spanish, please go to the bottom of the interpretation icon, is the little blob, and choose the language you want to listen this conference. We will have the agenda for you to know what's going to happen here. So we are going to first have expert Lee DeHines presenting an overview of the topics and some perspectives. Then we will have Vanessa Cueto from Derecho Ambiente y Recursos Naturales. They are going to tell us about their experience advocating and promoting transparency in Peru, but also their own experience with the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, just an example of those standards we are discussing here. And then we are gonna listen to our colleagues in Africa. So we will have Farai, Gloria, and Joyce. Farai and Joyce come from the Zimbabwean Environmental Law Association, SELA, and Gloria comes from Malawi. I'm gonna ask our speakers to start their presentations by introducing themselves. I'll let you tell people what is relevant for the conversation and what would you like them to know. What else I can say? I think before just jumping into the conversation, I was reflecting in what kind of intro could we have for a conversation like this. And this is a, let's say, specialized conversation, but I didn't want to have the risk of ignoring what is happening and the context and who we are and why are we here. We are mostly, or this audience is mostly civil society organizations, a crucial stakeholder, but most of the time in an imbalance for multiple reasons. And when you see the news, democratic spaces all over the world are shrinking. So this is like the cause that we live in and that we defend is presenting serious challenges. So I think, and this is just like as a provocation, as we reflect and as you tell us, like the speakers about the EITI, for example, is to think that the world that we have today is definitely different from the world, let's say, we had in 2003 when the Extractive Industries Initiative was created. So what are the lessons from that time and what can we take for moving forward in this geopolitical and this, like tense moment? And I refer to that broader context because mining and all are at the core of many of those conflicts. So with that, I just to let you know that ISLP, and for those that are not familiar with ISLP, we are a non-profit, and we provide pro bono services to governments or civil society or social entrepreneurs in the global south to promote just an accountable and sustainable development. So we are happy to have you all here. I'm sure we are, we are a community of lawyers and professionals committed with the topics we are discussing, with promoting transparency and accountability. And we also know very well like the context in each country. So we hope your experiences and your questions, enrich this conversation. And please don't be shy if the translation or the interpretation is not working. If you're having issues to post your questions, please let us know that we really want to listen all your thoughts. So with that, I'll introduce Lide Heinz, our first speaker. Thank you very much to everyone. Gracias a todos por estar acá. Yes, Lee, you can.
Can I begin? Yes? Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a real honor to be on a program with people who are working so hard and diligently in their home countries to bring the rule of law into play and to protect their citizens and their natural environment. don't know if you saw my bio, but I've been working with ISLP since 2014. I've done work in Malawi and in Zimbabwe, and currently doing work in Zimbabwe. And looking at some of the faces on the screen, I can tell that some of you may not have been alive yet when I started practicing environmental law 48 years ago. So I bring to the table experiences that include government service for 16 years and private practice since then. I retired in end of 2014 and began my pro bono journey doing a number of different things, largely with ISLP. And so I appreciate the honor to be here today. I'm going to talk from a very high perspective here about the importance of the rule of law. Obviously, I understand that local situations in each country are different. The laws are different, the cultures are different. And so all of those things have to be taken into account when you say things like the rule of law. What does it mean in real life when you're dealing with real life situations? One thing to remind everyone, in 2015, the United Nations, with all member nations, all of those represented on this Zoom call today, all of those countries adopted the Sustainable Development Goals in September 2015. And all 17 goals are very important. Two in particular that come to mind today that filter down through into the situations you're going to talk about is goal 12, which is to ensure sustainable production and consumption, and target 12.6 encourages companies, transnational companies, to adopt sustainable practices and integrate sustainability in everything they do, wherever they may be. And goal 16, which is promote peaceful and inclusive society, sustainable development, provide for access to justice for all, effective and accountable and inclusive institutions at all levels. And again, both of those goals are very applicable here. And I think all of you would know, if you would go to the UN website, you would find each country represented here would be saying things about how they are moving forward to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. Again, you have to look at those reports and make up your own mind as whether or not they are speaking truth when they say so. A stable legal system with courts and judges capable of interpreting and enforcing the law in an open, informed, and predictable manner is critically important here. A holistic cross-sector, multi-stakeholder approach is absolutely important. And I recognize from the work I've been doing with ISLP, not just in Malawi and Zimbabwe, but some other countries as well, that each approach in each state, each country to implement the rule of law must recognize that the national, political, and economic pressures that are in play in each country are the driving forces. What sort of statutes and constitution are in place to protect the environment and protect people's rights, people's property rights, are the driving forces here. So an international approach to rule of law, the UN approach to sustainable development goals is excellent, but it's how it's done on the local level that really becomes the driving force. There has to be a balance between all of these events. As I've learned in working on these projects, improving the economy of each country is absolutely the driving force in every situation that I've encountered with working with ISLP so far. The implementation of them is where the issue becomes gritty, so to speak. People be moved off their land because they don't own the land, be it pastoral land in Kenya or customary land or common ownership of land in different countries. What property rights lead to people being displaced and from their homes where they've been living for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So a robust system of public engagement and transparency is absolutely necessary to alleviate all of these tensions. The solutions, therefore, lie in understanding the rule of law. what laws are in place, what systems are in place to implement those laws, what government structures are in place to carry out these laws, whether the civil system that's in place is truly properly funded, whether it is properly scrutinized, and whether it's properly maintained becomes the issue. Then the rights of the citizens in those countries to take their grievances, whatever they may be, to a tribunal and take it to a tribunal that is fair, that follows rules of law, and that renders decisions that are applicable to the situation, and really the situation in play. Obviously, extractive industries destroy land, destroy the environment. That's the nature of the beast. But how those are done in a way that is open and transparent to the citizens, that allow citizens to participate in the process that lead to a permit being issued, become the critical daily, day in, day out factors that those of you in these CSOs on the representative on the phone today or on the Zoom call today live with. And that's where your problems come from. And I'm happy to have been asked by ISLP both to speak today, and I'm particularly pleased to have been an ISLP volunteer and meeting all these great people around the world, many of whom have ever seen a little box on a screen, but it's still a benefit. And so I appreciate the opportunity to make these opening remarks. I look forward to hearing what everybody has to say, and happy to answer any questions as we get into specific details in any of the countries I may have done work. So thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Lee. So now we invite Vanessa. Mira si puedes proyectar. Creo que sí.
Hola, buenos días.
Hola.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenos días. Bueno, buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Vanessa Cueto. Yo trabajo en Derecho, Ambiente y Recursos Naturales DAR, pero también soy representante de la iniciativa 80 por sociedad civil en el Perú. Entonces, tengo una presentación que quería compartir con ustedes. A ver, un momentito. Sí, entonces, en primer lugar, es un gusto para mí estar aquí compartiendo esta presentación y esta experiencia con los compañeros también de otros países, compañeros y compañeras, ¿no? Y espero que esto también sirva un poco para retroalimentar la situación de la transparencia en el mundo, ¿no? Y que yo pueda contribuir tal vez en entender un poco también qué pasa con la transparencia en Latinoamérica, ¿no? Y en este caso en Perú. Entonces les cuento un poco del contexto, ¿no? El Perú inició como líder de la iniciativa 80 en Latinoamérica, ¿no? Llevamos más de 15 años participando en esta iniciativa. Alcanzó también la categoría de país cumplidor. Actualmente la Comisión Nacional 80 está conformada por los 3 estamentos y tenemos pues dentro de sociedad civil también a representantes de ONGs y de la academia, ¿no? Como la Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú, y esto es dirigido por el Ministerio de Energía y Minas. Y por las empresas está la Sociedad Nacional de Minería, Petróleo y Energía, la empresa Southern Perú Cooper Corporation y también Cerro Verde, ¿no? El Perú se caracteriza porque en este tiempo es el único país que en la iniciativa 80 ha logrado avanzar con los 80 subnacionales, ¿no? Es decir, no solo la Comisión Nacional, sino también a nivel de las de las regiones, ¿no? Entonces tenemos actualmente 6 comisiones regionales, 6 AT subnacionales, y el principal reto es cómo se incluye la información ambiental, ¿no? Y desde ya creo que en Perú la inclusión de esta información ambiental desde el inicio ha sido gracias a la sociedad civil, ¿no? O sea, la sociedad civil de Perú es la que ha planteado la inclusión, la que ha luchado por la información, inclusive antes de que existiera el estándar, ¿no? Yo creo que el pedido es mucho mayor. Tal vez se ha podido incluir alguna información en el estándar, en el informe de transparencia, pero creemos que no es lo suficiente. No creemos que, a pesar de que hemos tenido avances de la información ambiental, todavía hay muchísima información que no se transparenta, información que tiene que ser empresa por empresa, desagregada empresa por empresa, y que todavía no hemos logrado que se aperture esta data de los gastos y pagos de las empresas en las industrias extractivas, ¿no? Entonces, efectivamente, para nosotros es un hito importante que la información ambiental se haya podido incluir este requisito de solicitud de información ambiental en el estándar 80, ¿no? Obviamente creo que vale la pena reconocer que fue la sociedad civil internacional la que logró que se incorpore este requisito de la transparencia ambiental en el estándar. Sin embargo, los retos son mayores, ¿no? Entonces, por dar un ejemplo, en el Perú hay un informe, ¿no? Un análisis que hace la OSD sobre la situación ambiental y las recomendaciones al país. Y una de las recomendaciones es fortalecer el estándar de transparencia a través de ley en las industrias extractivas. Y por lo que hemos visto hasta ahora, esto no se está cumpliendo a cabalidad, ¿no? Entonces sí hay varias información que nos parece importante, tanto de pagos y gastos ambientales y sociales que todavía no llegamos pues a obtener. Entonces, bueno, aquí el requisito 6, tan importante para todos los miembros de sociedad civil, ¿no? Y que desde Perú igual hemos tratado de ir incorporando, ¿no? Con el sexto informe de transparencia que hicimos en la Comisión Nacional, se logró incluir información en la parte contextual del informe de transparencia 80, y posteriormente se ha logrado también que se pueda incluir en el informe, en la parte de conciliación del informe 80, un pago del aporte por regulación de OEFA, ¿no? Entonces, es un pago que justamente sustenta las actividades de vigilancia que realiza esta entidad, que es la entidad fiscalizadora sobre las industrias extractivas, ¿no? Sin embargo, hay otros pedidos de sociedad civil en relación a la transparencia ambiental que necesitamos obtener, sobre todo la relacionada a los recursos hídricos, ¿no? Cuáles son los pagos que realizan las empresas por el uso del recurso hídrico, del agua, ¿no? Y también, por ejemplo, cuánto gastan las empresas en los temas de remediación ambiental, ¿no? Entonces, creo que estos son algunos de los... Un ratito. Creo que no puedo. 1, 2, 3. Sí, y bueno, les quería mostrar un poco toda la información que hemos estado incluyendo en los informes, ¿no? En el marco también de lo que queríamos que sea transparente, ¿no? Entonces tenemos, por ejemplo, Ahí toda la normatividad social y ambiental del sector extractivo, información sobre el sistema de evaluación de impacto ambiental, ¿no? También las funciones y responsabilidades para otras entidades vinculadas, los temas de multas, ¿no? Esto es un tema que sí nos interesa mucho que sea transparente también. ¿Cuánto están pagando las empresas por multas, las empresas extractivas por las multas por la realización de sus propias actividades, ¿no? Etcétera. O sea, esto sí, en Perú hay varios portales que se transparentan la información, pero lo que nos importa es que la información cada vez más pueda llegar a la población local para la toma de decisiones, ¿no? Entonces, estos podemos señalar. Igual en el séptimo informe se incluyó este aporte que debe cotejarse, ¿no? En el informe en la parte de conciliación del informe de transparencia nacional. Una iniciativa que también hemos estado promoviendo desde sociedad civil fue la realización de un estudio sombra de la transparencia de la información socioambiental. Como saben, la iniciativa ETI también tiene sus límites, ¿no? No se puede transparentar todo lo que desearíamos. Entonces, se tuvo esta iniciativa de realizar un estudio sombra en donde la sociedad civil recogió información sobre la data que queríamos que se pueda transparentar e hicimos nuestro propio informe sombra, ¿no? Esto ha servido de ejemplo para otros países como México, que ahora también están realizando estos estudios sombra de transparencia. Les quería comentar igual en relación al octavo informe de transparencia del EITI. Como les comenté, el tema del agua para nosotros era y es uno de los puntos más importantes para lograr una mayor transparencia, ¿no? Entonces, dentro de la comisión, con las limitaciones que muchas veces existen, se logró incluir en el diálogo a la Autoridad Nacional del Agua, ¿no? Y en el término de referencia del octavo informe, ahora se debe incluir información, por ejemplo, se va a incluir información relacionada al derecho de uso de agua, a las resoluciones otorgadas en donde se autorizan vertimientos de las empresas mineras e hidrocarburos, y también el importe de pago de empresas mineras y hidrocarburos de forma global por el uso y por el vertimiento de aguas residuales, ¿no? No hemos logrado hacerlo empresa por empresa todavía el importe de pagos del último punto que les comenté. No hay una todavía, yo creo que las empresas todavía no pudimos llegar a un acuerdo con respecto al empresa por empresa. Sin embargo, el tema está ahí, ¿no? Y hay varios otros temas que también se están tratando de incluir, como el enfoque de género, ¿no? Igual, bueno, aquí están las comisiones Haití regionales que desde Perú se está impulsando, ¿no? Hay una en la Amazonía peruana, en donde el titular de sociedad civil es una organización indígena también, ¿no? Y creo que eso es un buen ejemplo y lo están trabajando a través de las regiones del Perú. Aquí hay algunos ejemplos, ¿no? En Loreto, en Apurímac, en Moquegua, en Arequipa y en Piura. Sin embargo, por el contexto del COVID, la pandemia, etcétera, creo que ha habido varios momentos en donde el tema de la transparencia, por lo menos para la parte ambiental, ha sido un tema de que la ciudadanía la ciudadanía no ha podido obtener la información, ¿no? Entonces, también como miembros de la sociedad civil, hemos construido varios pronunciamientos en donde en la época de pandemia se han solicitado que no se fortalezcan las iniciativas de transparencia y no se debiliten, ¿no? Entonces esto ha sido firmado por varias organizaciones para justamente promover que en estos momentos de pandemia, donde justamente el acceso a procesos de participación ciudadana eran mucho más débiles, se pueda priorizar la transparencia de la información, ¿no? Igual en ese sentido hemos mandado varias recomendaciones al gobierno ¿no? Relacionado a la información que debía transparentarse en las industrias extractivas en la época de pandemia. Ahora, yo he hablado mucho de la iniciativa 80, ¿no? De cuánto se ha hecho o no se ha logrado hacer en la iniciativa. Sin embargo, creo que puedo resumir la situación de la transparencia en el Perú con un ejemplo, que es el caso del derrame de Repsol en Ventanilla, ¿no? Que es uno de los derrames, si no es uno de los derrames considerado desastre ambiental más importante de los últimos años, ¿no? Ha sido realmente terrible para el Perú. Y en este momento, cuando realmente se necesitó una mayor transparencia, ya que fueron 11.900 barriles de petróleo vertidos al mar, es cuando vimos todas las debilidades de los mecanismos de acceso a la información. ¿No? No se tuvo, la ciudadanía no conocía el plan de contingencia de una manera rápida, no se obtuvo información. La empresa reportó al inicio que solamente se había derramado 6.000 barriles. Posteriormente, el Ministerio del Ambiente señaló que habían sido 11.900 barriles. Y hay varios temas solicitados por la ciudadanía sobre información sobre el derrame que todavía no se ha brindado, ¿no? Actualmente el relator de las Naciones Unidas de desechos tóxicos se encuentra en Perú justamente recogiendo información sobre este desastre ambiental, ¿no? Entonces, yo creo que este ejemplo nos ayuda a ver que realmente falta mucho, ¿no? Para poder brindar información oportuna y que realmente ayude a la toma de decisiones relacionadas a la transparencia ambiental, ¿no? Entonces, tal vez, no sé, ahí voy el tiempo, pero tal vez brevemente los retos de la transparencia. Primero, con el tema de la pandemia hemos visto poco compromiso del gobierno, ¿no? Hay muchas debilidades institucionales y una falta de priorización. Y con el ejemplo del derrame era lo que quería señalar, ¿no? Que todavía para estas emergencias ambientales, estos desastres ambientales, no hay una reacción rápida del gobierno y por ello es necesario que los mecanismos de transparencia y de acceso a la información se fortalezcan. Y eso, muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti. Y perfecto con el tiempo. Bueno. So now we will welcome Farai from Zella.
Thank you so much, Pedro, and many thanks for creating this platform for us to share lessons on this great topic. So my name is Farai Mutondoro. I'm representing the Africa Institute for Environmental Law, which is a research arm or a think tank arm of Zella. So under that think tank arm, we collaborated with the Southern Africa Resource Watch into looking at one key question on what would be the lessons for Zimbabwe in as far as EITI implementation is concerned. The backdrop to that was the long years Zimbabwe had taken and is still taking to join EITI since 2011, if my memory does serve me well, that the government of Zimbabwe has been expressing an interest in being part of this global standard to the extent that there was a time when Zimbabwe domesticated the EITI and created what we call the Zimbabwe Mining Revenue Transparency Initiative, which again suffered a stillbirth. So against that backdrop and against a context where when we had a new government of the 2017 government, the Minister of Finance in 2018, 2019, he signaled that one of the key policy priorities for him was joining EITI. But then I think 2-3 years down the line, government did a reverse and there were allegations by MPs that, is this not different from the structural adjustment programs? Is this not losing our sovereignty? So against that backdrop, we then conducted a study and we sought inspiration from Malawi, from Mozambique, we sought inspiration from Madagascar, Tanzania, and Zambia and DRC as well, in as far as what are some of the positive lessons that they have learned on EITI implementation. And I'm happy on this call, I'm co-presenting with one of the authors of the Malawian case study, who is Gloria. So I think Gloria will speak more to that. So we noted that in many of the case studies, Zimbabwe, and these are the lessons that can also apply for other countries, the key point is having a legal framework that EITI is anchored upon, that has worked for other countries. So there's need for Zimbabwe to put in place an EITI legislation. The law could then serve the purpose of institutionalizing the EITI and compelling government agencies and companies to disclose payments and revenue data. So I think the idea there, it's not so much about saying we are joining EITI. We have had country case studies which have joined EITI, but there's no disclosure. So there's need for a legal framework then to compel government agencies like your Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation in the context of Zimbabwe, Ministry of Mines, and other key institutions to disclose in terms of payments and revenue that they are receiving. Closely attached with that, the need for a legal framework would then make it easy to institutionalize EITI. Effective implementation of EITI cannot be done without an institutional framework. I think when Gloria speaks to the Malawian case study, they will show the value of having an institutional framework that has a work plan, that has a supporting budget to implement EITI for the sole purpose of not ticking the boxes, but for the sole purpose of ensuring that there is disclosure, and there is accountability. So the second point, Zimbabwe, we noted that the starting point is good enough. Was there was a semblance of an institution, the Zimbabwe Mining Revenue Transparency Initiative. Government could consider to revive that if need be. But much as we might have the law, much as we might have the institution, it always boils down to the very aspect of political will, which is the political currency to push for disclosure, the political currency to push for data. So we noted that in the Zambian case study, which is very critical, we saw that within the top leadership, the top tier leadership, there was that support for EITI, but that has been missing in the case of Zim, where our political leadership at the presidium level, at the executive level, they might not buy into the vision, into the mission of EITI for whatever reasons. So political will needs not to be underestimated, but if we cannot push for it, political will is something that you can be offered by politicians, but civil society also has a key role to play in as far as pushing for the adoption of EITI. So we also recommend in the study for Zimbabwe, the need for parliamentary oversight and parliamentary discussion on this. We noted that civil society in Zimbabwe could move the EITI policy discourse forward through engaging and working with Parliament. And I'm happy Joyce is here. I think Zella has done so much in as far as engaging Parliament to understand the nuance and the importance and the value of Zimbabwe joining and subscribing to EITI. We've gone as far as, I think, also facilitating that the leadership within the Ministry of Mines, they attend and take part in EITI high-level discussions. So those are some of the attempts by Zella to ensure that much as you might want political will, but in at times you need to demand and to influence that will to be there. Then what we noted from Malawi and Zambia, which is very critical, is the multi-stakeholder group. The country case studies show that it is a key component for effective EITI implementation, where you have civil society, we have industry, we have government itself working together. We saw a semblance of that in Zambia, a semblance of that in Madagascar. Of course, there were challenges in this country case studies, but the very existence of a multi-stakeholder group that then looks at the data that has been submitted. What is the meaning of the data? If someone within a mining community reads that report, what does that data mean to that particular person? So the multi-stakeholder group is very critical, and it's one such platform where civil society can influence and access data from company disclosures. Then a very critical issue, Pedro, which we noted in terms of the lessons, is sustainable funding of the EITI process, where a country like Zambia since 2011, they'd expensed up until about $1 million, and for Malawi, I think last time when they facilitated a discussion like this, Gloria was sharing that it could not be sustainable for Malawi if they're not getting as much money from mining, then pay these huge amounts of money to get EITI reports. So going forward, we need to have a discussion on sustainability of EITI financing, where most of our governments might find or might use that as an escape route not to join EITI. So the very aspect of EITI financing is critical. Malawi, for Zambia, for instance, I think since 2011, data shows that they had used around $1 million. Then the adoption is critical. The adoption is critical for Zimbabwe. But I think that adoption needs to be framed in a context of other policy frameworks. Like in Zimbabwe, we have the National Development Strategy and the $12 billion mining economy. The discussion that Zella has been having and that we continue to have is that if Zimbabwe is to join EITI, you can unlock this much through cutting on illicit financial flows, through cutting on corruption, through cutting on smuggling of mineral resources, as it were, through also giving confidence to investors. I think the 2019 mining attractiveness index showed that a lot of investors, they were very skeptical about investing in Zim. So EITI then is very critical for you then to reassure and give your investors that confidence that there is disclosure there. We are very open to business in a manner that respects human rights and environmental and social rights as well. So those are some of the key lessons that we attained from that study that we facilitated, and I'm handing it over back to you. Happy that Joyce will also cement and Gloria on some of those points. Over to you, Pedro.
Thank you, Farah. We will go with Joyce now.
Thank you, Pedro. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. My name is Joyce Machiri. I'm with the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association and also coordinating the Publish What You Pay Zimbabwe chapter. So I'll just talk briefly about the prospects of Zimbabwe joining EITI as it is stated on the agenda. So I think, as Farah has said earlier on, that at some point, the momentum for the adoption of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative was built up in Zimbabwe, where actually we had the Minister of Finance mentioning that Zimbabwe is considering to join the EITI, as he expressed it in the 2019 budget statement. And so in his statement, he actually mentioned that in order to move along with international best practices on achieving transparency in management of natural resources, so government would want to be a member of the EITI as soon as possible. And membership is critical in order for the country to actually benefit from strengthened public and corporate governance, promote understanding of natural resource management, and provide the data that guides reforms for greater transparency and accountability in the extractive sector. So apparently now, all this excitement was kind of destroyed in the 2020, actually early in 2020, where actually government, it was reported that government is not keen to join EITI. So you'll find that in all this, as CSOs, we actually had made some advancement, and we had also been doing some initiatives actually to influence the adoption of EITI by the government of Zimbabwe. So at some point, we actually had to facilitate, like Farah mentioned earlier on, that some government participate in the 8th Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative Global Conference that was in 2019. And we, at some point, we actually, after that, had a multi-stakeholder dialogue meeting to discuss these issues. So, however, as time went on or as time lapsed, you find that the prospects have actually been stalled. And as CSOs, we actually feel that we are stuck in a way because government, one, is not keen to actually adopt EITI, or there are no actions actually towards joining EITI. And this is witnessed by the 2021 budget statement and also the 2022 budget statement, which are actually silent on issues of EITI. But however, you find that there are some initiatives that government is implementing, which actually relates well to the EITI standard or principles. So firstly, we have the constitution where transparency and accountability reforms are embedded in our constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. So section 298 subsection 1 on principles of financial management actually calls for transparency and accountability in all public financial matters. And section 299 talks about parliament oversight on state revenue and expenditure to enhance public transparency and accountability. So in the secondly, we actually also have Zimbabwe, where Zimbabwe managed to come up with the New Companies and Other Business Entities Act. And this act actually requires that companies must keep and maintain a register of beneficial owners of the company and to file such information with the registrar of companies. So with effect from the 1st of January in 2020, beneficial ownership registry actually became a requirement under the EITI standard. And this actually resonates well with the Zimbabwe coming up with this beneficial registry of owners actually resonates well with the EITI standard. But however, the major problem with the register is that it is not a public register and it remains confidential unless required to be disclosed through a court order, although law enforcement agencies like the police, financial intelligence unit can actually access the register, even banks as well. So this actually poses a challenge as it undermines public transparency and accountability. If the beneficial ownership registry was made public, civil society organizations, mining communities, and others actually would make use of it to scrutinize information and to take action to hold to account individuals who hide behind faceless companies and sometimes fuel corruption and plunder national resources. And then thirdly, we have the EITI standard is an environmental reporting, which requires reporting of material environmental payments to government to be disclosed, and also the encouragement of disclosure of information related to environmental impact and monitoring. This requirement is very much in line with the requirements of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, which was gazetted through the statutory instrument 134 of 2019. So actually, Zimbabwe government embraced sustainability reporting through the promulgation of this SI instrument of 2019, which makes it mandatory for all companies listed on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange to disclose environmental, social, and governance information. And of importance in this actually is the transparency and accountability window that comes through disclosure and sustainability reporting, which includes the ESG aspects. And then we also have the mining cadastral system, which is a computerized mining title system, which the government of Zimbabwe is actually implementing, and they are at an advanced stage in establishing this system. So you find that this system will actually provide an interactive mapping of the profile, nature, ownership, operations, even impacts of artisanal small-scale mining. And this system will actually assist different stakeholders like local leaders, local authorities, farmers, miners, Ministry of Mines to better understand even the conflicts, even the location of some gold trading areas, environmental hotspots, and dangerous mining pits, among others. But it will greatly assist government also as a target group by providing with additional information for use in pursuit of artisanal small-scale mining gold mobilization, which is currently ongoing in the country, as well as formalization, issues of syndication, registration of mining claims, and it actually also brings openness and accountability in the ASM sector by making this data publicly available online and even also in printed form. So the system will actually restore confidence and trust in the allocation and administration of mining claims, which has actually been a challenge in the country with incidences of multiple claim ownership disputes that have been happening of late because of the lack of transparency and accountability in the mining title management. So this is another initiative also that the government of Zimbabwe is doing to also promote issues of transparency and accountability. But also government also recently enacted the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency, which we call the ZIDA Act, Chapter 1437. So the act created the Zimbabwe Investment Agency, which is a one-stop shop responsible for improving effectiveness and competitiveness in the investments projects through assessing and overseeing investments agreements, including mining joint venture agreements. And it also provides for a legislative framework for the implementation of joint venture agreements, establishment of government rules for the public, as well as private procurement and public-private partnerships. So the act actually represents a positive step forward, since it increases the potential for an improved level of transparency, especially for a mining project that is implemented as a joint venture. However, it does not adequately address contract transparency, while it contains a specific provision on transparency. Notably, also, you find that it is silent with regards to public disclosure in terms of contract negotiation and all performance monitoring. Hence, it does not adequately actually speak to Section 315 of the Constitution that I mentioned earlier on. And it also does not set parameters for the involvement of Parliament in contract negotiation, like I mentioned earlier on about the enactment of the powers of Parliament to actually also be part of the contract negotiations and review and performance monitoring. And more so, this act as well does not provide for public disclosure of the joint venture contracts and approval of joint venture agreement, which is a preserve of the cabinet. And then another interesting development, we have the amendment to the EMA Act. Earlier on, I talked about the issues of the EITI standard having environmental reporting requirements. And the EMA Act, which is the Environmental Management Act, is also being amended in Zimbabwe, looking even at issues to do with social impact assessments, among others, issues of enforcement, which have actually been a problem with the current act. And then, so these are the initiatives that I could highlight, which actually the government of Zimbabwe is doing towards improved transparency and accountability, as we would want them to adopt EITI, which also speaks to issues of transparency and accountability. On top of that, I mentioned a bit of some of the CSO initiatives that are being done by the civil society organizations in Zimbabwe, including also the Publish What You Pay, the likes of Zela as well, who are also part of the Publish What You Pay, where we are engaging with Parliament. Farai talked about it earlier on, but we also currently running a campaign on contract disclosure, where we would actually trying to analyze and also outline some of the impacts being brought about by lack of transparency or by lack of contract disclosure within Zimbabwe, and how this is actually affecting the mining communities, and also try to influence for the implementation of some of the initiatives that I mentioned earlier on being done by government to ensure that there is actually implementation where we just move away from the talk show or where we actually have just some laws in place but not being implemented or being enforced. So this is what we're trying to do. But we also have South Africa, which is joining EITI, where they've committed to join EITI, and would want to leverage on that as Zimbabwe CSOs to actually see how best we can work even at the SADC level to ensure that Zimbabwe also is keen, moves towards adopting the EITI. But we also have, I talked about the SADC region, where we also have Mozambique being part of the EITI, but they also recently joined the KP, the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme. So they've also become part of the Kimberley Process Civil Society Coalition. So, and Zimbabwe is also part of that. And we've recently been chairing up until last year, end of last year, 2021. So we would also want to use this platform, the Kimberley Process in Mozambique, as well as working with South African CSOs to see how best also we can influence, and it's more of like actually taking it to the regional level to ensure that we implement we have transparency and accountability initiatives, especially influencing the government of Zimbabwe to join EITI. I think for now, this is what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm collecting here my thoughts and my questions, and we invite you to do the same. We will have a round of questions after this last presentation that Gloria is going to deliver. So we invite Gloria from Malawi. Gloria, if you want to introduce yourself, and we welcome you, your presentation.
Thank you so much, Pedro. Can you hear me? Just wave if you can. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and really happy to hear familiar voices and be part of this discussion. I work with the Center for Environmental Policy and Advocacy. I'm a program manager, but I'm also the national coordinator for Publish What You Pay Malawi. SEPA is currently a member of the Malawi EITI multi-stakeholder group representing CSOs, and I'm an alternate member. And so I'm going to just be sharing with you a bit of background to begin with, and then what has actually worked and what are some of the barriers and opportunities. So definitely the EITI is one of the most important strategies and tools that's advancing accountability and transparency in the extractive sector in Malawi. And just to share a bit of background on our journey, Malawi has never really been an extractive kind of country. We've had quite a bit of artisanal small-scale mining in mainly gemstones, but we really got into large-scale mining, or at least mining that interested the public when we had established a uranium mine called Kailekera. And with that mine came quite a lot of controversies, and that was when there was quite a lot of pushback from the public. And it was around that time that CSOs also mobilized and started looking for a way in which government could be held accountable, because at that time, the legal framework did not really provide space for engagement. It actually gave power to the president as the or administrator of all minerals in the country. And so it meant that there was very little room for accountability as well as transparency in the way that the sector was being managed. But also because there had never been an interest before, it obviously had not been on the radar in terms of reform or conformation with democratic principles. So the law was quite archaic and people wanted a way in which they could engage. So that was when the EITI was put on the table as one of the tools that could actually support this process. So in 2015, we became a candidate country and we published our first report in 2017. And that covered, unfortunately, the 2014 or 2015 period because still the interest was in what had been happening and what had been done. We have currently produced a report which has been submitted that covers the 2018, 2019, and the 2019 and 2020 financial years, which is a huge step forward that I'll also highlight in terms of what has actually worked out very well for us. And the reason that we joined, like I have said, there were issues of corruption and just the fact that there was such a veil around the extractive sector. And so when we became part of the EITI, we also have 3 constituencies within the EITI. We've got the private sector and the CSOs and government agencies forming the MSG. And it is currently being hosted by, well, the Secretariat is the Minister of Finance, as well as the champion. So in terms of what we've done with it, it's really been a mixed journey, and it's had quite a lot of frustrations. And I want to start with the frustrations and the negative experiences before I get into what has worked so well. In terms of frustrations, once the reports have come out, I think there's been a lot of room for analysis amongst non-state actors, looking at the recommendations and what we can learn from it. Because like I said, it was a tool to sort of bring in the the CSOs or other stakeholders into the conversation, with the hope that this would inform reform, it would inform the institutional frameworks, the way that government operates. So there've been a lot of high expectations in terms of, once the reports are released, what do we do with the information? How is this actually informing the reform process? And unfortunately, I think there's been quite a good number of years where there's been some frustrations, in the sense that the recommendations provided in the reports do not seem to be taken up or responded to by the government or the relevant agencies. And I think this has sort of led to a point where some stakeholders did feel like perhaps this is not really working for us, because we don't seem to be responding in the way that we should respond. There were calls for institutional reform, where you've got very specific recommendations on, for example, how the licensing process should be done. And this will be very important when I share with you what has worked, because people had expected that after raising the current challenges that are there with the licensing process, you would see that change in the way that it's done. But it's been a few reports later, and this has not been done. There's also been calls for audits, because there have been some unreconciled figures in the different reports. Now, there's been explanations from government, but this still hasn't been adequate, because it doesn't fully account for those differences, as well as just the raising of the alarm on how well, revenues should actually be managed, in terms of how the institutional structure should be framed. So, with these frustrations in mind, from a point of appreciating, though, what has actually been happening, the first thing is that it actually has institutionalized disclosure, which otherwise would not have been possible. Like I said, there was quite a veil around the extractive sector. We did not have access to contracts. You couldn't even know what licenses have been given out, who has what license. But there was a beneficial ownership disclosure roadmap, something I don't think would ever have happened if it had not been for the EITI. And we currently see in the EITI reports a whole list of the different owners and even the licenses being listed. And it's even contributed to the development of the mining cadastre, which now allows you to access very freely the different licenses and to understand who owns what, who is mining where across the country. This is information that would otherwise have been very difficult to come across. There's also currently plans in support of this to audit the Mines Office. So the Auditor General, who is also part of the MSG, is actually currently planning to undertake this audit in this financial year. So these have been things that have happened because of the EITI. It has also really exposed corruption and provided a platform to document it. And I had mentioned how one of the frustrations had been the fact that the issue of the licensing process had been queried in one of the reports to say that we need to reform that process. And so recently, I think last year or 2020, there was some allegation raised against one of the officials in the Ministry of Mines, Department of Mines, who had allegedly been involved in a negotiation with a company on the allocation of the mining license for a particular mine. And because of the EITI, we had the platform as CSOs to actually call for this to be documented in the EITI. Before this process, there would not have been that opportunity to even engage, because, to be honest, the ministry was actually engaged, but there was nothing that they did. They did not really offer any solutions. We called for them to actually take administrative action against the officials that were caught in this corruption scandal. And it was such a big scandal, but you just did not get any reaction at all from the Department of Mines. And so the only platform that actually responded to this issue was the Malawi EITI MSG, to the extent that we had to write the Anti-Corruption Bureau and currently continue to follow up on this issue in the EITI reports. And this is so significant because corruption cases often just go under the radar, after the scandal has blown over. But this means that there's a record of this actually happening, and that somebody has to be held accountable, and we will continue to follow up on it. And without the MSG, this would not have been possible. There's also been the availability of data from companies of public interest. So there are certain companies that have perhaps controversial history, I would say. For example, there's a company called Nyala Mines. There's been a lot of allegations around this company. What are they mining? Where are the revenues going? How do we know that this is what they're generating from this mine? And because they did not meet the threshold, they were just never included in the reporting. So what we did as CSOs is that we did actually advocate for this company to still be included and for us to actually get the data on this company. Was it adequate? Not fully, but it was a very good start, because for years there had been cases even between CSOs and the company around issues of revenue and reporting and compliance. So this was quite a notable start in the fact that they could actually now collect data from this company that can now be used to the advantage of CSOs in terms of pursuing justice. There's also been companies in the forestry sector that before were not reporting. So this has really assisted in helping us to advance a cause with enough information, because it's one thing to know that something doesn't seem right, and it's one thing to actually have the information that allows you to engage in a very meaningful way. There's also been capacity building. So the last 2 reports have actually been developed by a local independent administrator. Farai had raised that in the study that we did, one of our concerns was the fact that there are currently very limited resources allocated to this process, which means that without external or development partner support, it would be very difficult for us to sustain the production of these reports. But with the capacity building that has been undertaken, the fact that an independent administrator can actually do this job, it means that we now have the capacity as a country, not only to produce these EITI reports, but even to do more in terms of auditing and contribute without having to meet that huge cost. So we can actually continue this initiative because we have ensured that as an MSG, we had pushed for a local independent administrator. We've also seen that CSOs are now more meaningfully engaging in the sector because we have information available, but we've also been able to be on platforms where we interact with companies and understand how they work, and government as well, and also have those kinds of meaningful interactions that allow us to have more constructive conversations and just be in a place where we're equals and can actually have a meaningful exchange that has an impact on the issues that we're trying to advance. And finally, there's also been the inclusion of artisanal small-scale mining reporting. The government has been pushing for the formalization of the sector because of the increased level of illegal ASM activities. So the inclusion of the ASM sector in itself means that we are already prepared for when we have formalized the sector completely, we already have a background, we already have the experience in reporting. And it also means that even right now, we're able to access data that would otherwise not be available in the public domain. Now, in light of COVID-19, I would say that it's also been both a barrier and an opportunity. It's been an opportunity because it did create the provision from the Secretariat for flexible reporting. And what this meant is that it's also helped us to catch up as a country and produce more relevant reports, because one of the issues is the relevance of the data. If it's a report from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, will that really be relevant now for advocacy work now? So currently we've really been able to catch up, and we hope that this will really have an impact on our work. Unfortunately though, a lot of companies were not able to submit their reports because of scale down in operations. Some of them had to leave the countries, maybe for those that had expats working within the companies. So they were not able to have certain types of data. And this has really impacted the quality of the report that we had now. General challenges, we really hope that we can still address the fact that there's no EITI law, which would play a huge role in really advancing compliance, but also there's still quite a limited use of the data. A lot of points have been raised around environmental and social payment and reporting. We haven't really developed a comprehensive template, but there's also limited coordination between the agencies that are responsible for environmental and social reporting. And yet this is probably one of the most relevant areas for communities, because that's what they look at. They don't want to know about beneficial ownership. They don't really want to know about, certain things, because for them it's very technical. The fights that they're having now is on social payments with the companies. So how do we then explain to the communities that this is actually what the company should be paying based on the reports? This is what you should be seeing in your community based on the reports, when we don't have adequate data on the environmental and social payments. So this is really an area that we continue to work on and push on to perfect the template and allow for more meaningful data. But also involvement of stakeholders beyond the reports. I think we haven't really done that at a large scale, because it almost became a process of just producing reports and waiting for the next validation. But I think certainly the recent action by CSOs on the corruption case has stimulated the interest in the public on the EITI, and it's really opened up that conversation for more stakeholders to be involved. So that's quite an opportunity for us to advance as an MSG on how we can get more people into the conversation, whether it's members of parliament and local councils, as well as local communities. I will stop there for now, and I hope that we can engage further in the discussion that's just coming up. Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you to all of the speakers. So we welcome your questions. In the meantime, I have some questions for the speakers, and I'm going to change to Spanish because the first question is for Vanessa. So, bueno, una cosa que para resaltar de la presentación de Vanessa, yo creo que es un mensaje importante para los que estamos acá como sociedad civil de diferentes partes del mundo, y es el statement de entrada que dice Vanessa, y es: gracias a la sociedad civil en Perú y a la sociedad civil internacional se incluyó los requisitos de disclosure de información ambiental en la iniciativa. Eso es un achievement, un logro concreto, es un logro para estar orgullosos, y la idea es encaminar esta conversación un poco a buscar qué otras metas concretas o qué estrategias deberíamos buscar como sociedad civil, como dije, en este nuevo contexto, que no es definitivamente el contexto de cuando se creó la iniciativa 80 en el 2003. Una pregunta que yo tenía para Vanessa, y me surgió también escuchando lo que decía Gloria sobre los reportes, la información que se produce, y la pregunta que yo quería hacer a Vanessa, porque sé que DAR ha sido, digamos, muy estratégico, muy exitoso en la manera en que promociona, distribuye, orienta la información que produce y los reportes. Entonces quería, Vanessa, si tú nos podrías contar un poco, por ejemplo, cuando mencionabas el Shadow Report, ese reporte sombra sobre transparencia en la información ambiental. Un poco, digamos, cómo es el proceso para publicar esos reportes, qué información toman, cómo la contrastan. No sé si se podría sacar ahí algo, y después cómo deciden, digamos, cómo distribuir esa información, un poco cómo se construye eso, digamos, desde que surge la necesidad de hacer visible esa información hasta que se tiene un producto concreto con el que se puede hacer advocacy, con el que se pueden, digamos, buscar exactamente mejorar esos estándares. Eso sería para Vanessa. Para Faray, hay un tema, Faray, si pudieras de pronto ampliar un poco, porque creo que es un aspecto interesante, y es el del el funding. ¿De dónde sale la plata, o cómo aseguramos que están los recursos para implementar estas estrategias? Y ahí también si de pronto Gloria nos puede contar un poco también cómo ha sido el caso de Malawi, digamos, para asegurar que haya recursos para implementar la estrategia. Y una última pregunta que tenía para Joyce, pero obviamente todos los panelistas bienvenidos, es, o sea, tú nos contaste que hubo como un momentum para que la iniciativa se adoptara en Zimbabue, el gobierno estaba interesado, hubo un movimiento hacia la adopción, pero después algo pasó. Y la iniciativa no se implementó, no se concretó. mirando ese proceso en retrospectiva, de pronto, ¿qué se debió haber evitado? ¿Qué se pudo haber hecho diferente? ¿O simplemente no había condiciones en ese momento? Y la pregunta es, ¿qué se pudo haber hecho diferente a nivel, digamos, del país y del proceso? Pero también de pronto como sociedad civil, si hubo algo, una lección de algo que debe haberse hecho diferente. Entonces, para, digamos, sintetizar, es una primera pregunta en torno a la información que se produce, al Shadow Report, una segunda pregunta en torno al financing, los recursos, de dónde sale la plata para implementar eso, y una tercera es sobre esas acciones en el caso del gobierno que quería unirse en Zimbabue a la iniciativa, pero después no lo hizo. Y simplemente ¿por qué me llama la atención digamos, este retroceso o esto que pasa en un gobierno que decide no tomar la iniciativa? Es porque con otra temática, sé que por ejemplo en Perú pasó con el caso del acuerdo de Escazú, que es una iniciativa también internacional para la defensa la protección de los defensores de derechos ambientales, que ustedes saben que están amenazados, y en un momento también el gobierno, digamos, a través hubo unas campañas de desprestigio, de decir que se atacaba la soberanía del país y que por eso no se podía unir a esta iniciativa internacional. Sé que en Zimbabue hubo algunos argumentos para atacar el Haití en ese mismo sentido de temas de soberanía nacional. Entonces, es el último tema que me gusta. Entonces, información, funding y hacer, digamos, estrategias para que los gobiernos se sumen. Y con eso, entonces, le doy la palabra a Vanessa, si quieres empezar.
Sí, muchas gracias, Pedro. Sí, solo para contar un poco cómo se elaboró y por qué era estratégico poder realizar este informe sombra, ¿no? Nosotros en el año 2017, en la Comisión Nacional Haití, los miembros estábamos tratando de incluir información ambiental, ¿no? Para el sexto informe de transparencia. Sin embargo, de las negociaciones solo logramos que se incluya en la parte contextual. Era la primera vez que en un informe de transparencia se iba a incluir información ambiental. Sin embargo, había limitaciones para poder tener toda la información, ¿no? Entonces, en la plataforma ampliada, en el año 2017, una plataforma ampliada de sociedad civil, en donde hacíamos seguimiento a industrias extractivas, se hicieron una serie de reuniones en donde con varias organizaciones hicimos una lista de la información que en base a la experiencia de trabajo de varias organizaciones era necesaria, teníamos interés en que se transparente la información. Entonces, ahí, por ejemplo, los estudios de impacto ambiental eran un tema fundamental, pero no solamente cuánto se paga por hacer el estudio, ¿no? Sino en la implementación del propio estudio de impacto ambiental, es decir, las medidas de remediación, los planes ambientales que se incluían dentro del estudio, cómo se desarrollaban, cuánto la empresa gastaba en la implementación de las medidas a las cuales se había comprometido, ¿no? Y ahí salieron una lista de solicitud, de información que era necesaria, la información de género, ¿no? Que justamente ya posteriormente también se ha fortalecido un poco dentro del estándar 80. Teníamos la información de los recursos hídricos, ¿no? En Perú existen muchísimos conflictos sociales por el tema del agua, ¿no? Entonces eso se volvía un tema también fundamental. La información de salud de las personas también era clave. Y bueno, también, por ejemplo, el tema de las multas, ¿no? Entre los años 2013 y 2017 hubieron una serie de derrames de petróleo en la Amazonía peruana. Entonces, el tema de que si las empresas estaban cumpliendo con los planes de remediación en la Amazonía era un tema fundamental que se quería conocer, pero no solamente tener la data, que muchas veces puede ser data muy técnica, sino también era ver cómo esta data se lleva a las personas, ¿no? O sea, los mecanismos son usados por ellas. Entonces, posteriormente a ello se hicieron solicitudes de acceso a la información pública, no desde la comisión, sino desde sociedad civil, a cada una de las entidades del gobierno y se fue monitoreando y a partir de eso se hizo. Se incluyó en el informe sombra también el tema del acuerdo de Escazú, ¿no? Como propuesta, bueno, todavía no está ratificado, varios países, ¿no? Estaba todavía como propuesta y se incluyó también como una iniciativa importante. Y así, hasta la fecha, eso ha servido un poco como los puntos para la hoja de ruta de Leiti y para que poder ir pidiendo más información dentro de la comisión. Ahora, no puedo negar que muchas veces el tema técnico de cómo generar una propuesta para transparentar la información de los gastos y pagos sociales ha sido un reto constante para la sociedad civil, dado que en la mesa prácticamente somos nosotros los que movemos el tema, ¿no? Entonces sí, eso necesita una especialización, ¿no? De cómo, ya en temas económicos, de cómo ir transparentando. La experiencia de Colombia, que hicieron una consultoría sobre la transparencia ambiental, también ha sido usada, ¿no? Y este ejemplo de informe sombra ha sido llevado a otros países en el marco del plan de trabajo que se tiene como países latinoamericanos en el marco de Leiti, ¿no? DAR también forma parte del Board Internacional, entonces sociedad civil, como representante de sociedad civil de Latinoamérica, y ahí también ese ejemplo ha servido para otros países, ¿no? De que no necesariamente todo se puede lograr dentro de Leiti. Y creo que sí es importante rescatar el estándar, ¿no? Más allá de que, o sea, sí creo que es importante que los países cumplan con el estándar, pero muchas veces pasan estos momentos en donde hay mucho apoyo y baja el apoyo y el país se compromete menos, pero el estándar como estándar creo que sí sirve como para, en este tema de, sirve como una hoja de ruta, un punto en el cual las organizaciones también pueden exigir que se cumplan los compromisos del gobierno, ¿no? Entonces, muchas veces la estrategia de sociedad civil va más allá del Leiti, pero sí teniendo en cuenta los nuevos estándares de la iniciativa, ¿no? Entonces, sí creo que es importante tener también mecanismos específicos, especializados para ir recogiendo la información. En Perú se ha hecho punto por punto. Y ahora, como vuelvo a repetir, el tema del agua, de la transparencia del recurso hídrico es para nosotros muy importante.
Gracias, Vanessa. Thank you. Now Joyce, if you wanna share with us a little bit about the reports and information, but also about the financing. And particularly, we would like to hear from you if you have any lessons on, the experience of Zimbabwe, willing to commit with the initiative and then abstain from that. If there are any lessons or highlights from that, Joyce. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. So basically, I think it's not really like more of like, yes, there are lessons learned, especially on why Zimbabwe is not joining EITI or keen to join EITI. But I guess the main challenge that we have is the issue of lack of political will. I'll just give an example. At some point, we had a national mining policy that was once developed, which was actually talking about adopting a model mining sector governance for Zimbabwe, but it was never finalized. So you find that there are a lot of vested interests that actually hinders development of mining policy in Zimbabwe. We still have the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill. It has been under amendment for I don't know how many years. And even we started talking about EITI, this is the 12th year now, ever since we started talking about EITI in Zimbabwe, but nothing actually has yet materialized. So it's a matter of lack of political will. And also there's the speculation that at some point that I think mining companies may not also be willing to let go of the old system, among other issues. But what we have actually realized we could do and learn from this process as civil society organizations is that we actually now use the other avenues that are there to promote transparency and accountability. Like the issues that I mentioned earlier on, I mean, the avenues of the mining cadastre, issues of the ZIDA Act, the Constitution, and the like. So this is now what we are using, even the beneficial ownership registry. These are the avenues now that we are using to actually push for transparency and accountability. But we are not losing our hope with regards to also pushing for adoption of the EITI. But overall, what we have also realized is also that the Ministry of Mines actually wants a comprehensive study done by actually all the stakeholders on EITI to really understand the pros and cons of actually joining EITI. So we are actually also in the process of facilitating that. So those are some of the lessons that we've actually picked from what we've been doing. So I think also it's not only about us as CSOs running parallel to the process of influencing EITI, but actually to have to involve all the parties and stakeholders involved. So that's why we are in the process of working on this comprehensive study, inclusive of all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. And now we will hear from Gloria. If you want to add anything on the questions, please, Gloria.
Thanks, Pedro. I think much has been said on the strategies. I'll just comment a bit on the funding. As far as CSOs are concerned, I think we've been very instrumental really in supporting the EITI process in Malawi, and we have actually been one of the key contributors towards the implementation of the MSG of the Moiti work plan, which sort of guides what the MSG will be doing or what the EITI will be doing in any particular year. And part of that has been through capacity building and even just facilitating the first launch. So that's actual dissemination to the community. We even produced a citizens report, which was translated into the local language for one of the communities, a mining affected community. And so we obviously get our funding from different partners, but that has been one way from our funding to be able to support the national government in this process. So that's one way of them mobilizing that resource. And the other way has definitely been them as well engaging with partners. So I think GIZ has been a long-standing supporter of the EITI implementation in the country. But like I said, we've also been looking at how we can minimize the cost of implementation, including the push for increased allocation of funds through the national budget. This continues to be an issue that we're pushing for, but it would be really great if that was the case, because it would address a lot of the administrative issues around the whole process. I really like the question on national sovereignty versus the EITI. And I will say that as a Pan-African, this is something that I also, at some point, also question that, is this really an African thing? Is this really something for us? Or is this about any other intention? Because this is something that is raised in a lot of discussions, especially where you're talking about sovereignty, indeed. But to be honest, from being in the MSG, I can honestly say that it is really just a tool, and you can do with it what you want to do. And I don't think that any country implements the EITI in the exact same way as the next country. I think the previous presenter just shared that their priority is water. Our priority has been issues of corruption. Like I have said, we were interested in seeing companies that we've never really understood what they do. How are they remitting their revenues? Where are they selling their products? That's what we're interested in. We're interested in issues of let's say, if specific environmental payments, what's happening to the petroleum fund. So you will see that if you read different EITI reports, you can really get a sense of what this country or this MSG is interested in, bearing in mind that the MSG pushes the agenda of their constituency. So as CSOs, when we go into the MSG meeting, what we're representing is what CSOs are bringing in from their communities. When companies come into the meeting, they know what companies are interested in seeing in the EITI reports. So this really varies from country to country. But also, it's really no different from a lot of other international standards. The extractives industry is not a localized thing. It is global. So you cannot operate in a global environment without demonstrating some level of compliance with global standards. It actually is one of or companies are one of the biggest beneficiaries from the EITI, because they are able to establish a good relationship with communities wherever they go. And that's really important. It also helps them in terms of accessing resources. So even just financing from different investors. What EITI does is it gives you that credibility. It shows that you are, a company that can actually comply with national requirements, but also international. And this is really important in a world that is increasingly looking at responsible investment. You cannot afford to be seen to be going against the grain as a company if you want to continue to grow. But you also have to be responsive to what's happening. Otherwise, as a company, you continue to disadvantage yourself. So they do benefit greatly. And governments as well actually are also the second, maybe companies and government are at par. Because for government, what is important for government is to have that public trust. You cannot run a government if you do not have public trust. People need to know that what the government is doing is responsive to people's needs, and that they should be able to trust that the institutions work, that the governance systems are actually working for their benefit. And what the EITI does is it opens up that conversation. It allows you to show that we're willing to open the purse. We're willing to have this discussion with you. And so it allows that development of trust between stakeholders, CSOs, communities, companies, and the government. And because tax justice issues and environmental impacts are transboundary, this is a global world. You're looking at illicit financial flows. Even as a government, this is the only way that you're able to track what's really happening to revenues. This is how you can cap the losses, especially in Africa, where we've seen that quite a lot of revenues are lost through illicit financial flows. So I don't think that it brings into question issues of national sovereignty. That is really an excuse that is often used for situations where we don't want to accept the fact that this is a global world and we need to find a way that we can all work together to address issues of accountability and transparency in a global market and in a global environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria, and thanks everyone. We are 5 minutes over the time, but we want to thank everyone. Thanks, Sarah, for your message on the chat. Yes, we are interested in hearing your interest on future discussions. I'm gonna ask you a last favor. Is when you leave the meeting, there's gonna be a survey, a pop-up survey. It takes 1 or 2 minutes, but it would be really helpful for us to know your interest, what you like, and what other topics would you like to discuss. I don't know if the speakers have any other questions, or the audience, or if you want to say something to close, Florencia. Otherwise, I think we're good.
Thank you so much, Pedro. Maybe just a quick thank you to everyone. Wonderful discussion. I've learned so much. And Pedro, thank you so much for such a great moderation. Thank you also, Bridget Masufire, for all her coordination as well and support, and for everyone for attending. Over to you, Pedro, for closing.
Bye. Ciao, gracias.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Gracias.
Thank you so much for coming.